In 1919, a young federal agency almost nobody had heard of was handed a single, narrow law about stolen cars. It seemed like a minor piece of housekeeping, a bill about automobile theft. But that one law would become the legal key that transformed a small, powerless bureau of government clerks into the most feared crime-fighting force in America. It's the reason the FBI could chase John Dillinger. It's the reason a stolen sheriff's car sealed his death. And it's a story almost nobody knows, because the weapon at the center of it wasn't a gun or a fingerprint. It was a law about who owned the car you were driving. This is how stolen automobiles created the FBI. Most people think the FBI was born fighting gangsters, that it emerged, fully formed, to take down the bank robbers and kidnappers of the 1930s. The truth is stranger and far more interesting. For the first 15 years of its existence, the Bureau of Investigation was a weak, limited agency with almost no power to chase the criminals we now associate with it. What changed everything was the automobile, and specifically a 1919 law about stolen cars that quietly handed the Bureau the one thing it had never had: the authority to cross state lines. You'll see how the car created an entirely new kind of criminal that no local police force could stop. You'll see the single law that gave the Bureau its national reach. You'll see how that unlikely law, a statute about auto theft of all things, is what let federal agents finally hunt John Dillinger. And you'll see the tragic case of the first Bureau agent ever killed in the line of duty, gunned down over a stolen automobile. To understand all of it, you have to go back to a time when the FBI could barely do anything at all. When the Bureau of Investigation was created in 1908, it was a tiny outfit with a narrow mission and very little power. This is the detail that surprises people most. The early FBI was not a national police force. It couldn't be. In the American system, police power belonged to the states and the cities. A murder was a local crime. A robbery was a local crime. A federal agency had no authority to go chasing a killer or a bank robber across the country, because those crimes weren't federal. The Bureau's agents in those early years handled a narrow band of federal matters: banking violations, antitrust cases, some fraud, and even then, in the beginning, they couldn't carry guns or make arrests on their own authority. They were investigators, not the gun-toting G-men of legend. That image didn't exist yet, and the law gave them no way to create it. And here is the crucial limitation, the one that defined everything: jurisdiction. A criminal who committed a crime in one state and then drove across the state line into another was, in effect, beyond the reach of the law that wanted him. The police in the first state had no authority in the second. There was often no federal charge to bring. The state line was a wall, and any criminal fast enough to reach it could climb over and vanish. For most of human history, this hadn't mattered very much because fleeing was slow. You could run only as fast as a horse. But at the dawn of the 20th century, something arrived that shattered that limitation completely. That something was the automobile, and specifically the cheap, mass-produced automobile. On August 12, 1908, the first Model T was completed at Henry Ford's plant in Detroit. By pure historical coincidence, the Bureau of Investigation had been created just 18 days earlier. The FBI and the mass-market car were born in the same summer, weeks apart, and their histories would be intertwined from that moment on. The Model T would put America on wheels. Reliable, affordable transportation was about to reach the ordinary person for the first time. And with it came something nobody had anticipated: an entirely new kind of crime. The early automobile was almost absurdly easy to steal. Few cars had any kind of built-in lock. Ignitions were primitive and simple to hotwire. There were no vehicle identification numbers to trace a car back to its owner. People routinely left their cars parked out in the open on busy streets for hours. To a thief, an early automobile was a valuable, portable, sellable object that also happened to provide its own instant getaway. As one legal scholar put it, the car was the perfect chattel for modern, large-scale theft, a thing worth stealing that could carry itself away at speed. And as car sales exploded across America, so did car theft. By 1918, more than 27,000 motor vehicles were being stolen every year in just 28 of the nation's largest cities. It was a crime wave, and it was growing. But the deeper problem wasn't just the number of thefts. It was what the car did to crime in general. The automobile didn't only create car thieves, it supercharged every other kind of criminal. Suddenly, a bank robber could hit a bank and be 20 miles away before the police had even organized a response. A kidnapper could move a victim across a state line in an afternoon. A killer could commit his crime in one jurisdiction and sleep that night in another, hundreds of miles away, untouchable. The car dissolved the old geography of crime. It made the state line, the very thing that had always protected fleeing criminals, into a weapon they could use at will. Local police, bound to their own jurisdictions, were suddenly outmatched by anyone with a full tank of gas. Congress finally saw the problem, and in 1919, it produced the law that would change the Bureau forever. The law was introduced by a Missouri congressman named Leonidas Dyer, and it carried his name in shorthand, the Dyer Act, formerly the National Motor Vehicle Theft Act. Congress passed it on October 28, 1919. On its surface, the Dyer Act was narrow and unglamorous. It simply made it a federal crime to transport a stolen motor vehicle across a state line. That was it. If you stole a car and drove it from one state into another, you had now broken a federal law, and that single fact changed everything about what the Bureau could do. Because here is the mechanism, the piece of legal machinery that most people never understand about the FBI. The Bureau's power comes from federal jurisdiction. It can only act where a federal law has been broken. And before 1919, the fast-moving, state-line-hopping criminals of the automobile age rarely broke any federal law at all, so the Bureau had no way in. The Dyer Act cracked that door open. Now, the simple act of driving a stolen car across a state border was itself a federal offense. It gave the Bureau a legal hook, a jurisdictional key, to enter cases that had always been locked away in local hands. The car had given criminals the power to escape across state lines. The Dyer Act gave the Bureau the power to follow them. And follow them it did. Through the 1920s, the Bureau used the Dyer Act to pursue professional car theft rings across the country. But the law quickly proved to be far more powerful than a mere anti-theft measure because of who these car thieves so often turned out to be. Many of the men caught transporting stolen vehicles across state lines weren't simple joyriders. They were military deserters. They were fugitives wanted for other crimes. They were members of organized criminal gangs. The Dyer Act became a tool for reaching dangerous criminals who could not otherwise be touched federally, a way to arrest a man for the stolen car and then discover the murders, robberies, and rackets sitting behind it. More than any other single law, it began building the Bureau's reputation as a genuinely national crime-fighting organization. But this new power came at a terrible price, and it produced one of the most solemn milestones in the agency's history. On October 11, 1925, a Bureau agent named Edwin Shanahan tracked a professional car thief named Martin Durkin to a garage in Chicago. Durkin was exactly the kind of criminal the Dyer Act was meant to reach, a man who stole cars and moved them across state lines. But when Shanahan moved to arrest him, Durkin drew a gun and shot him dead. Edwin Shanahan became the first agent of the Bureau of Investigation ever killed in the line of duty. and it happened in a car theft case over the very crime that had given the Bureau its national reach. The Bureau moved heaven and earth to catch Durkin, who fled, predictably, by car across multiple states. He was eventually captured, and the message was clear. The automobile had made the Bureau's work possible, and it had also made it deadly. If this kind of hidden history, the strange, forgotten connections between cars and American law enforcement, is what you are here for, hit subscribe. Badges and chrome covers exactly this kind of story every week. Now, everything so far has been the setup, the slow, unglamorous building of a legal tool through the 1920s. But to see the Dyer Act's true power, its almost unbelievable payoff, you have to arrive at the 1930s and the most famous manhunt in American history. Because the law that let the FBI finally corner John Dillinger, the most wanted man in the country, was not a law about bank robbery. It was not a law about murder. It was this quiet little statute about stolen cars. And the way it happened is one of the great ironies in the history of American crime. By early 1934, John Dillinger was the most notorious criminal in the United States. He and his gang had robbed banks across the Midwest, plundered police arsenals for weapons, killed a police officer, and staged jailbreaks that made headlines coast to coast. He was a sensation and a menace. And yet, here is the part that stuns people. For most of his crime spree, the FBI had no clear legal authority to chase him at all. Bank robbery in that era was generally not a federal crime unless specific federal conditions were met. Murder was a state matter. Dillinger's crimes, as monstrous as they were, largely belonged to the states he committed them in. The federal government and its Bureau of Investigation was watching one of the most dangerous men in America operate and struggling to find the legal key that would let it join the hunt. Then, in March 1934, Dillinger handed them that key himself. He was being held in the county jail in Crown Point, Indiana, awaiting trial, a jail described as escape-proof. Dillinger escaped anyway, and depending on which version you believe, he did it using a real gun smuggled in, or a fake one he had carved from wood and blackened with shoe polish. Either way, he bluffed his way out, and then he made the single mistake that would cost him his life. Fleeing the jail, he stole the sheriff's car, and not just any sheriff's car. It belonged to Sheriff Lillian Holley, who ran the Crown Point jail. And then Dillinger drove that stolen car across the state line from Indiana into Illinois, heading for Chicago. The moment those wheels crossed the state border, John Dillinger committed a federal crime. Not bank robbery, not murder. He transported a stolen motor vehicle across a state line, a violation of the Dyer Act, the National Motor Vehicle Theft Act of 1919. And with that single act, the most wanted man in America became a federal fugitive. The Bureau of Investigation finally had its jurisdictional hook. A federal warrant was issued for Dillinger, not for the banks he'd robbed or the men he'd killed, but for the stolen car. And now the full weight of the federal government and its agents could come down on him. Less than 5 months later, on July 22, 1934, FBI agents cornered John Dillinger outside the Biograph Theater in Chicago and shot him dead. The manhunt that made the FBI famous, that turned its agents into the legendary G-men of popular culture, was unlocked by a law about stolen cars. And Dillinger was not the only one. The Dyer Act had proven a powerful idea, that the federal government could reach a mobile criminal by finding the federal thread inside his crimes. That idea reshaped American law. In 1934, spurred by the Dillinger-era crime wave, Congress passed a sweeping package of new federal crime laws, making it a federal offense to rob a national bank, to flee across state lines to avoid prosecution, to transport a kidnap victim over a state line, and to assault or kill a federal agent. It was a revolution in federal power, and the Dyer Act of 1919 had been its prototype, the proof that the interstate nature of modern crime could be answered with interstate federal authority. In 1935, the newly empowered agency was formally renamed the Federal Bureau of Investigation, and its agents were at last given the clear authority to carry weapons and make arrests nationwide. The G-Man of legend, armed, federal, able to chase a criminal across the entire country, was finally real. And the whole edifice traced back to that first narrow law about stolen cars. The same expanded reach let the Bureau pursue the entire rogues gallery of Depression-era outlaws, Pretty Boy Floyd, Babyface Nelson, the Barker Gang, the same gangsters who, not coincidentally, lived and died by the automobile. Pretty Boy Floyd was gunned down by federal agents in an Ohio field in October 1934. A Ford V8 had carried him there. The car had created these men, and a web of federal law built on a car theft statute helped bring them down. There's one more case that shows just how far this power extended, and it's one almost no one remembers. In 1935, FBI agents were investigating a career criminal named George Barrett, nicknamed the Diamond King, who ran an elaborate stolen car operation stretching clear across the country. His method was ingenious. He would buy one car legally, steal an identical one, file off the stolen car's motor numbers and stamp in the numbers from the legitimate paperwork, and then sell the stolen car as a clean vehicle. He worked coast to coast, renting a car in San Diego under a false name and driving it east to be swapped and sold, then doing it again from St. Louis. It was pure Dyer Act territory. But when Special Agent Nelson Klein moved to arrest Barrett in College Corner, a tiny town straddling the Ohio-Indiana border, Barrett opened fire and killed him. Klein has the somber distinction of being the first agent killed after the Bureau was formally renamed the Federal Bureau of Investigation earlier that same year. And here is the detail that says everything about this story. Barrett fired his shots from the Indiana side of the line, and Klein fell dead on the Ohio side. A criminal whose entire livelihood was built on exploiting the state line killed a federal agent straddling that very line. Barrett was caught, tried, and convicted, and he earned a grim place in history as the first man ever sentenced to death under a brand new federal law, making it a capital offense to kill a federal officer. His path to that fate had begun with stolen cars. The automobile that had built the Bureau's power was, again and again, also drawing its agents' blood. So step back and see the whole shape of it. Here is the twist that reframes the entire origin story of the FBI. We remember the Bureau as the agency that hunted gangsters, as if it were built to do that from the start. But it wasn't. For its first 15 years, the FBI was a limited, hemmed-in agency that could barely cross a street, let alone a state line. What transformed it was not a dramatic crime-fighting mandate handed down from on high. It was the automobile and the unglamorous, almost boring little law written to deal with the automobile's side effects. The car created the modern criminal, fast, mobile, able to treat the whole country as his hunting ground and every state line as an escape hatch. And in response, the Dyer Act created the modern FBI, an agency that could finally follow that criminal anywhere his stolen car could take him. The two grew up together, locked in a chase. Every time you picture a G-Man of the 1930s, the fedora, the Thompson gun, the black sedan, you're looking at something the automobile made necessary and a car theft law made possible. The FBI didn't gain its national power by fighting bank robbers. It gained the power to fight bank robbers because of a law about who owned the car. It's even written into the Bureau's own founding tools. When the FBI laboratory was established in 1932, Two of the very first evidence collections it created were not fingerprints or ballistics. They were automobile tire tread patterns and automotive paint samples, reference libraries built to identify cars, because cars were so central to the crimes the Bureau now pursued. From its legal authority to its forensic science, the modern FBI was shaped at its foundation by the automobile. In 1919, Congress passed a small, narrow law about stolen cars, and almost no one noticed. 15 years later, that law was the reason the most powerful investigative agency in the world could hunt down the most wanted man in America. The Bureau of Investigation was born weak, hemmed in by state lines it had no power to cross. The automobile gave criminals the speed to escape across those lines at will, and the Dyer Act gave the Bureau the one thing it needed to follow: a federal key to unlock a national chase. John Dillinger robbed banks for years and walked away. He killed and walked away. But the day he drove a stolen sheriff's car across a state line, he handed the FBI the weapon that would end him. The agency that would come to define American law enforcement was built, quietly and almost accidentally, on the theft of automobiles. The gangsters lived by the car. And in the end, it was the car and a forgotten law about it that brought the law down on them all. This is Badges and Chrome, the channel that covers the police car's history almost forgot. Subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.